Today, we welcome gardener, forager, and community builder Jada B. She is the co-founder of the People's Cooperative Market in Bloomington, Indiana, and she is the author of the book Gardening and Farming Journal, Our Liberation Fruits. Jada ensures all who enter the People's Co-op's Saturday's Market are fed with local eggs, bread, and veggies that are deliciously spiced. Please welcome Jada B. And
Hi, everybody.
my share.
Awesome. Thank you, Emma. Hi, everyone. Again, welcome to this webinar. My name is Jada B. As Emma said, I am a co-founder of People's Market Bloomington, and we are a small nonprofit co-op market, farmers market, run entirely by Black and Brown individuals in Bloomington, Indiana. We live in a state that is highly agricultural, but our particular town is more of a real like a city, like a mini city. But we are surrounded by agricultural areas, and we formed our market in order to combat racism in our community, as well as the growing need for locally produced food for people who are in need of nutrient-dense food. I myself am a lifelong gardener, but I just became a full-fledged farmer in the last 5 years. In fact, farming is my full-time position, as well as the activism and running the farmers market. I have an urban farm, so it's a small city plot farm, but I grow enough food for myself and my wife to live on, as well as to sell items at the market and what we call value-added products, where we grow herbs and things, and we put those into teas or tinctures and sell them at the market. What we're going to be covering this session, as Emma said, is Hugelkultur or Hugelkultur, you can also say, or just Hugel. A lot of times you get it shortened Hugel. And I'm hoping to tell you what it is, why you should use it, how to create one, as well as the maintenance for it, and any problems or issues that people talk about having with Hugelkultur. And I'm going to provide a few books and resources at the end for you to look into to see if this practice is right for you. And I think with that, Emma, I'm going to switch over to the presentation. Is that good? Are we there for that?
Yes, go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to share my screen, and give me a second while we pull up the presentation. Okay, like I said, we're talking about Hugelkultur today. Hugelkultur not only is a great way to garden, but it is also a great way to save space and use the material that you find. Put simply, Hugelkultur is a form of permaculture. Permaculture is a style of gardening that mimics nature. It uses sustainability. It stacks functions, and it utilizes and minimizes how much resources that you need to use. And so we use organic waste, common garden materials to create a layered bunker or bed that, as the material decomposes, feeds the growing plants and surfaces. The organic waste material ranges from large logs that should be decomposing, partially decomposed, branches, twigs, dead plants, grass clippings, leaves, leaf mold, straw, compost, manure, as well as many other items in your garden. And so as we get going and we're talking about these different materials, you'll see some Hugelkultur books or planning guides that prefer one method to the other. It really just depends on what you're growing and what you have available. And I will talk about my preferences and what I think works best for the majority of food that I like to grow. But honestly, the resources that you're going to find book-wise are going to be all over the map as to the materials that you would use. Hugelkultur means mound culture. It is an ancient German practice that spread across the ancient world, and it is an effective means for farming and gardening. In particular, it is used right now in Scandinavian countries as a preferred method for gardening. And they really prefer the bunker method. So we'll talk a little bit about that, where the mounds are built up and into almost a triangle rather than the flatbed method that I prefer. But this was a term made popular in the 1960s by Herman Andre in a gardening book. You may have also heard this method called lasagna gardening or layered gardening or even no-dig gardening. Patricia Lanzis sort of coined the term or made it popular, the lasagna term, in the 90s. And you can see here in the pictures, there's sort of two different forms of some garden beds, as well as a a trench style, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. It works by is a self-feeding system. So your organic matter that you're putting at the bottom breaks down over time into black dirt, and the nutrients as it's breaking down feeds the plants and feeds your soil. And so there is very little need for other soil amendment. And it aids in the fertility, and it reduces weeding, as well as provide a water retention. So it helps keep your water in your soil where it is needed most, as opposed to draining away. You're using yard waste, and this also acts as a carbon sink and carbon sequestering. That carbon sequestering and carbon sink is necessary because it captures carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, and it helps release more oxygen into the atmosphere, again, as a wonderful way to provide climate change efforts, to help with climate change efforts. You're maximizing your growing space with a hugelkultur bunker and or bed. You are utilizing the vertical aspects with it, as well as when you're using a raised garden bed, you're not putting as much brand new material and expensive compost and topsoil into your garden bed just to get it full. You're utilizing the yard waste as a means to filling your raised bed and just putting the basic growing material on top. And then all of that will compress and release the nutrients that you need. There are various types of these bunkers and or beds. Some are built in a deep trench. So you dig down at least 4 feet into the ground to create a nice layer of trench. Some are 6 feet in. And that's where you lay large logs down. And again, these logs are not fresh logs. They should be older logs. They should be starting in the decaying process. And you layer those logs on the bottom, and then start putting your other layers on top. That trench bunker method means that you're probably not going to have a very tall raised area on top of that, but it still will provide a little bit of mounding. The hybrid method, where you're starting above ground, is a little bit taller. You're going to be getting nice sort of peaks and a raised effort into it. And then the above ground starts with your logs layered on top of each other, and then you're packing in the other material around it, sort of create a triangle or an arch shape over the top of your logs. Others made in the raised garden beds, as we said, can be sort of a flat bed, or you can mound it up. This style of of gardening is really versatile. It really depends on what you want to do with it and what space you have. And it doesn't have to just be in a straight line either. So if you have a curved area that you want to make a bed in, you can use this method. You can shape it to any design that you want. So if you're really into garden design in your gardens, you can make it into a curly cue throughout your garden. You can use it to line paths, and on the other side of walkways. Um, and it can be very, very versatile. And it's really just up to you and your ideas of how you want to see your garden pan out. Plus, if you perhaps live in an area where you have very little gardening space, this will really going up as opposed to out will totally maximize how you can use that space. Um, so let's talk a little bit about how we build. This is the meat of the conversation. So there are two schools of thought. One is that you start building in the fall and you have all of winter to have the material to start breaking down and really creating nutrients for the spring, for your planting in the spring. Others say you can start your bed in the spring and have it break down throughout the spring and summer, and provide nutrients. Almost all Hugelkultur bunkers are going to be better off the second year. Your first year, you may not see as much nutrients coming into your ground and your soil as you will the year after. So it's really up to you whether you want to get a head start for spring or you have the time in spring to do that, or sorry, in fall, or whether you don't have the time and you're just going to start it in spring. I've started many a bed in spring and have yielded quite a bit of veggies from starting in spring. So I would say, in my opinion, there shouldn't be a preference. It's really just about how much time you have to start. Now, in fall, when you're maybe cleaning up your garden and dealing with fallen branches and things like that, you just might have more material. I live in Indiana, and in the spring, we get a lot of storms coming through. And so we get dead branches falling down all of the time. And it is easier to retrieve those fallen branches in the springtime than it is in the fall. And I'm also in the fall is when I'm capturing my leaves in order to turn it into leaf mold for the spring. So again, you start off creating your bed in either the fall or spring. You want to remove or kill off the grass. So you can either remove the grass by simply using shovels or large farm equipment to take off that first layer of grass, or you can kill it off by tarping over it for a season. The other method is covering the grass with either cardboard or newspaper in order to get that, make sure that that grass isn't coming up through your layers. But you do want to figure out a method to keep the grass under control. I prefer to kill off the grass or remove the grass rather than use cardboard or newspaper. And I'll talk a little bit about why I'm not a huge fan of cardboard and newspaper in a bit. But then you start, like I said, with your decaying large logs, and you put those on the bottom. Now, this picture here that is on this slide doesn't show the large logs. Why? Because this is more of the lasagna gardening style. They have green composted matter and the newspaper and cardboard and straw here rather than large logs. But a true Hugelkultur is going to have large logs, twigs, sticks, and branches at your bottom. You really need that in order to provide the water retention that you're looking for. The next layers can depend on what materials you have available. In general, the dead plants mulch, grass clippings, dead leaves, leaf mold, and straw. Um, I'm not a huge fan of grass clippings because I'm trying really, really hard to not have grass in my garden whatsoever. And so we're killing off the grass as much as possible. I find that unless your grass clippings have set out for a little while, they can, if they, especially if they're tall and they have already gone to seed, they can go to seed in your Hugelkultur bunker, and you don't want that. So you have to think about that. Dead plants from last season are great as long as they don't have any disease on them. So if your tomato plants have uh, any sort of decay or disease on them, you don't want to use things like that. If they have any pests in them that haven't died off from the winter or haven't or are just problematic, I would say don't use those in the fill-in parts of your Hugelkultur bunker. Um, and dead leaves and straw. So the I would prefer instead of fresh dead leaves. So I know that's kind of an oxymoron. But instead of the dead leaves that you've captured just recently and you're putting in, to rather turn it into leaf mold and to let it kind of compost down a little bit or chop it up in some shape, way, or form so that it has an ability to decompose a little bit finer. The same with fresh straw. You can use fresh straw. It is perfectly fine to do that. My preference, though, is for about a year-old straw that has been sitting out and has weathered. Both your leaf mold and this like older straw can speed in the decay that you want with your larger logs and twigs in the bottom. So you're just introducing decay and mold and things that will break down that rich material that you're putting in at the beginning. But it's not to say that fresh straw and dead leaves you've just picked up won't work, because they 100% will. Same with the grass clippings, it 100% will. In my garden, we mulch quite a bit because we like to have our pathways to eventually break down into black dirt, so that they help feed the rest of the garden. So we use a lot of like commercial mulch bought from our local uh, landscaping place. And so we incorporate the mulch into the first two layers as well. Filling those gaps is crucial. You don't want a lot of space in between your logs, your branches, your twigs, and that next layered material, that second layer material of dead leaves and straw and things like that. You want that to be pretty full and no gaps. And we'll go into that later. And the layers should be fairly thick. You want to think about the layers fairly thickly because they will compress as the weight of the layers are placed on top, as well as when water hits it and things start to settle. That compression will aid in the decomposition, and the materials can be intermixed too. So you can layer a few of those things like the leaf mold, the mulch, the dead leaves, the straw together. But you want to make the first two layers fairly thick, and that works really, really great in a raised bed situation because you're practically filling the entire raised bed before you put on your compost in your top layers. So we'll talk about that in a second. As you can see in the picture here, this is like I said, when we were talking about the styles of the Hugelkultur bunkers, you can see that this is an interesting style. You can walk into it and reach everything in the middle, but it's really saving a lot of space here by going upwards as well as this tight U shape. And it gives garden interest if you're someone who's interested in designing. In this area too, some people include cardboard and or newspaper as a part of the base layer, as we talked about, but also in this third layer to act as a bit of carbon in there. Again, I find that most cardboard and has too much tape, glue, and ink from the printing to be safe from harmful ingredients. So I stopped using it. Some people argue that there's not enough of that to be impactful to you. But if I'm doing true organic gardening, if I'm doing sustainability gardening, I want to make sure I'm not putting anything into my garden that can cause me harm or the environment harm. And so I just sort of stopped using it. I also find that it breaks down at uneven rates, depending on where it's put in the layering process. Plus, it can be a bit of a hassle, to be really honest, to save up your cardboard and take all the tape off of it and make sure that the glue is off of it. And it's just another step that is sort of a little unnecessary to me. And even as a weed suppressant, I would rather chop the weeds down and compost them and use them as a part of the layering rather than use cardboard to suppress the weeds. So that's why I say it's not that big of a deal to use cardboard. If it's a part of the only material that you have access to, if you have tons of it, then go for it. I'm not here to tell you what is best for you. The fourth layer is a composted layer, which can be used of veggie scraps from your own composter or composted manure. You don't want fresh manure in this, and you don't want fresh veggie scraps in this, in my opinion, because the fresh manure is too high in nitrogen and could burn potential plants as you're putting them in. It could mean that your seeds don't sprout correctly. But the fresh veggie scraps and things like that can also be a rodent attractor. And you want to do anything and everything you can do to keep rodents out of your Hugelkultur bunkers and beds. And you see this is a top layer bed here in the picture, where this is just on top of the regular soil, and it doesn't have to be terribly high. It doesn't have to be at a peak. It can be relatively flat like any other kind of gardening surface. And then your fifth layer, which is your topsoil layer, is made from clean, fresh dirt. It can be the compost or your region's topsoil. So whatever you saved from pulling off the grass, it could be that. It can be, again, your composted from your own composter, but you're going to mix it with koya, which is coconut husk. You're going to mix it with perlite, vermiculite, and a little bit of sand. Why? Because this is like basically your potting mix. This is what, if you're growing your seeds indoors, this is a very good mix to use. But this layer doesn't have to be very thick because you're planting right into it. And you basically look to see what the seed depth is, or the planting depth is of whatever plants you're putting in, and that's how thick this top layer should be. Again, you've already built up your layers of really good nutrients. So this is just the what you're planting directly into to give your seeds a start, to give your plants a start. And there are some people who just buy topsoil from your local hardware store or gardening center. That's totally fine. That's up to you. Whatever works and is easy for you. I think if you do a little bit of research, you'll be able to find other garden centers locally, especially like non-commercial garden centers, meaning like non-corporate garden centers, that will have really good topsoil available for you at pretty fair prices, and you can get them in bulk. So look around to your local garden centers that are run by your local people instead of going to the big box stores for your topsoil. Koya is something that a lot more people are using and knowing about these days. That coconut husk is great. It is a byproduct from the coconut industry, and as we're all drinking and eating more coconut these days, it is a lovely product to have as a mixture into your plants. It provides what we used to use peat moss for, and like the a lot of people are moving away from peat, primarily because of the impact to the earth. And so I think that the Koya is a wonderful replacement, and is a relatively inexpensive replacement. You can get them in these big bricks that you add water to, and they puff up. And it's like a fun little experiment, especially if any of you have kids. Your kids will love to see the Koya bricks expand and turn into this lovely fresh dirt for you to use. It's probably one of my favorite things to do every year, because it reminds me of those like toys from the 80s that you got, and they were in a little capsule, and there were little sponges, and you put them in water and they expand. And so it's kind of like the adult farmer version of those 80s fun 80s toys. And then your sixth layer that you're going to put on top. So this lady is planting into, this young person is planting into their garden, but they're going to put on top another layer of plants and then straw. And you want the straw to keep in your moisture. Some people will also use mulch for this. I think that's fine, but I prefer straw. Because this would, in the next year, it's going to be that next layer that this top layer you're going to start off with. So I like straw. Again, this can be fresh straw as opposed to the composted straw, but if you only have slightly composted straw, then use that as well. It helps keep and retain your topsoil moisture and keeps your plants in place. If you're planting seeds into your bed, it also detracts the birds from stealing your seeds, from going right in and stealing your seeds. They may pull up some of your straw to use for their nest, but they haven't hit your seeds, and that's what's important. Okay, so we've talked about our layering practices. We've talked about how to build your Hugelkultur bunkers. So let's say you're ready, they've been built, and you're ready to plant. If you're using these flatbed methods, like seen on the left-hand side of your screen, you can see that you can do basic rows with these. Okay, you can plant like you would plant any other type of veggies into them, and you can work them as a normal garden bed. And if you have raised garden beds, similarly, you can keep them fairly flat and plant them in. You can do row planting in these and use them quickly and easily that way. And as you can tell, these folks have put some straw on top, like I was talking about. And that just sort of holds everything together. And if you're using the bunkers, they need a bit of planning, excuse me. When you're planting, you want to think about putting things like beans or anything that has a cascading effect. So say your squashes, your pumpkins, your trailing beans, your vining plants at the top or at the bottom, so they can spread out along the bottom, or they can cascade down. And you can really maximize your usage that way. Tomatoes and herbs and other plants should be done in the middle area. You can do things like okra at the top or off to the sides. You can use things like yeah, all of your different herbs and things like that are great in the middle area, and they kind of bush out. If you look at this picture on the right hand side, you'll see this little area onto to the far right. Those are herbs that have flowered. And so that's a really good place for the herbs because it also helps us to keep pests away. I also tend to plant a lot of pest deterrents in with my Hugelkultur bunkers. And using that companion plant guides to make sure everything fits together really well. Root vegetables, I think, are great on the ends or in the middle, if you're using a bunker. Some folks do not think that root vegetables grow very well in Hugelkultur bunkers. It really just depends on the space you're using and how you made them. Flatter bunkers are going to work better. So flatter beds are going to work better for root vegetables. But it's not to say that the taller, more pyramid or triangular shape bunkers won't work for root vegetables, because they 100% will. It's really just about knowing what material you put in and where you put it in that particular bed in order to do your root vegetables. Bunkers can also be you can use tree planting in bunkers. In fact, many of the bunkers that I have seen in people's gardens in Scandinavia often have like an apple or fruit tree on one side, and they're planted on the ends and grow up from the ends. And they use that as a shade for any of the more shade-loving plants, right? So then you plant your greens and cabbages and things like that around that area. And then the more sunny side is where you put all of your veg that needs bright, bright sun. You can also use this Hugelkultur style to do flower beds. This picture on the right is a perfect example of a beautiful little flower bed. You can put any kind of flowers in there in a mounding kind of way. They have put cascading plants in there, which I think is going to be really perfect when it all fills in. And those can be just sort of dotted all over your yard. I think a lot of people think you need to control the beds by having borders around them. And I think what you'll find is as these plants grow in, they'll create their own beautiful little border, and it will be lovely. I hope the person who posted this, I stole this from the internet, hoping the person posted this posts an update to their photos, because I want to see how this all fills in for them. I personally like to intermix my wildflower planting in my gardens. And so I'll have a long strip of wildflower plantings around my bunkers and around my beds. But I'll also intermix the flowers into my beds just to try to bring as many pollinators as possible into my space. And so things like marigolds work really well as filler plants in your bunkers because they are pest deterrents, and they're gorgeous and they attract your pollinators. So think about the kind of companion planting and pollinator planting that you want to see in your garden. Now we can talk about maintenance a little bit. The best thing I think about the Hugelkultur is that it is very simple in maintenance, extremely simple. In fall cleanup, at the end of the season, you can leave the plants where they are unless they're diseased or pest-ridden. You can chop them and leave them, or plant a cover crop to hold the topsoil during winter. What I do is I leave the majority of my plants in place, unless again they're diseased, they picked up disease or have some pests. And I leave them in place and let them hold the soil until spring, when I am ready to clean up my beds a little bit more. And I wait quite a bit just to let the pollinators wake up a little bit. And if they are, the plants are still in good nick, I either, or if they have a lot of stalks to them, like some of my okra plants they dry out. They're perfect to start another bunker with. So I use those as the fill material in another bunker. Or I can just chop them and leave them in place, put a little more straw over the top of that, and then put some more compost over the top of that and a little more topsoil and plant into it. If you want to, when you're putting your bed to sleep for the winter, you can just put a little more straw, heavily straw them, and it'll help to insulate them from the winter. And then in the spring, you can pull back that straw and start planting. Or you can top off your beds on top of the winter straw with compost and topsoil, like I said. I tend to do that because the compression that happens um, over the over the season of growing and then into fall and winter means that I just, maybe want to top up my beds a little bit. I use raised garden beds primarily. And so sometimes that compression is a little lower than the lip of the garden bed. So I'm just trying to top it up to get back up to the lip of the garden bed. It is not a full necessity unless you've noticed that you've pulled a lot of nitrogen out of your soil. And then you want to put some nitrogen back in with your compost, coffee grounds, et cetera, et cetera. But honestly, they can kind of be left. I know some people that if they're in warmer zones, so some of you are coming from warmer zones than I am. I am zone 6, and that means we can get some pretty cold winters and freezing temperatures a lot of the winter. But some of you who are in warmer zones, you may just take like a fleece covering or a garden netting and just put it over the top of your bunker, and that will suffice to keep it insulated, and the heat from the decomposing and the heat from keeping it insulated will mean that your garden is just ready to go come spring. Plus you're getting a longer growing season anyway. So your spring is going to start a little bit earlier and your summer is going to end a little bit later than ours. And so the fleece covering is a wonderful way to just protect everything underneath. So say you're growing peppers, you're in a higher zone and you're growing peppers and you want to overwinter them. You just leave them in your bunker and put the fleece over the top of them, and that will insulate your peppers and keep them coming back for years and years to come. Some people talk about the problems with hugelkultur. Again, we sort of mentioned some of these, that perhaps they're not ideal for root plants or plants with deep root systems. I find that that is not exactly true. I think that that has to do with the farmer, the gardener, more so than it has to do with the method. And so they just need proper care, especially if you're thinking about putting a tree in one of your bunkers. You need to know how tall that tree is going to get, what maintenance you need to do to the tree over the years, whether you're going to do like a pellier where you're going to be trimming the tree so that it grows its fruit in a lateral way rather than a traditional tree. So you need to do the research on what you're planting and what the requirements are. So perhaps a typical bunker where it's a triangle shape is not ideal if you want to grow potatoes, if you want to grow carrots, rutabaga, and any other sort of root plant like that. So maybe instead you want to do a flatbed system where it grows down, and maybe you need to make your compost layer a little deeper and your topsoil a little deeper. So you just need to adjust it and do your research. That's really what I can say. There is a potential for a rodent problem, sure. The rodents I tend to find where I'm at are not rodents, but they're bunnies. The bunnies really love my beds, and they want to they want to have their babies in them. And so no matter what, we have fencing and all sorts of stuff, but you know how rabbits are, they can get into anywhere. They just want to, they're in the top layer. So because I put so much straw in over the winter, that is a perfect place for them to want to have their babies. To be honest, by the time I'm ready to really get into my beds, they've already had their babies and they've left. So they've just left me with some fur. And a little bit of rabbit pellets, which is not that bad for my garden. But I will say, if you are having trouble with rodents, it is probably because you have fresh composted material in there, and like fresh manure and fresh composted material, and they're going for that. And or your wood layers are not compacted enough or not filled in enough. And so that's where, when we get into that, like putting the logs in, then putting the branches in, and then intermixing the twigs, And then that next layer of your leaf mold and straw and mulch should be filtered into that and really settled down into that. And so when you put on your next layers, you sort of want to compress that down a little bit as much as possible. That's why I usually do my filling of my beds in stages. I start with the wood, the twigs, and the branches, and then I let that go for a little bit, and then I come back and I do my straw, my leaf mold, my other material in there to sort of help compress it so that all of the wood has had a chance to kind of sit and settle. Hopefully I've gotten a rain or so in between there. And then that also will help settle everything as well. And I find if I do that, I'm not getting as many pests. Additionally, in a raised bed scenario, it is harder for the pests to get in. So those are some things to think about. Some people talk about nitrogen depletion. That can happen, but that can happen in any garden. So the best way to combat that is by testing your soil and making sure that you have amendments on hand, like coffee grounds and your rich compost. And I add, like I said, I add a layer of compost and new topsoil every single year. And it definitely helps. It helps with the compression part of things, but it also helps with the nitrogen depletion. So the steep sides for some people may not be accessible. So if we're talking about the bunker style, that may not be accessible for some people. So then I suggest moving to a flattened style, so the raised bed style, and fattening out your sides with added material. The settling and initial investment. So here's where you need to be a part of a community and talk to your neighbors and talk to your local farmers, talk to your farmers co-op, if you have one in town, as well as look on Facebook Marketplace. I don't suggest Facebook for really anything other than trying to find compost and people throwing out wood or other material that they don't need. So Facebook Marketplace is an amazing place to find for cheap and or for free compost, straw, rotting wood, things like that, that you can get your hands on for cheap or free to help do the initial investment in material and making your bunkers. Again, if you have a piece of land that is very small, you may be looking around going, I don't have enough trees to put this material in. My property, like I said, is a a city plot. And so if we weren't next to a park, we wouldn't have a lot of trees around us. Luckily, we're next to a park, so we have a lot of trees, but we don't have a lot of trees in our yard. And our neighbors who are not backed up to the park don't have access to a lot of wood. And so we can help them with that. We tell people to come and grab sticks and wood from us all the time. But again, also look into your local farmers market co-ops. Either they will have that material for you, or they will know how to get that material for you. The same with your local farmers. This is a great way to learn and meet other people who are growing things in your community. Your local farmers would love to give you rotten manure, okay? They would love to give you their composted manure because otherwise it just sits on their farm. And we were lucky this year and we had to travel like 15 minutes or 20 minutes away from where we live and pick up composted 2-year composted manure from a horse farm. And they were more than happy to give it to us. We paid 25 or 20 bucks for 3 tractor scoops. So it was a full truck bed load of composted manure. And I'm sure anywhere you are, unless you're in the city, you're going to be able to find people who are willing to get you this type of material. If you live on the coast, my friends, you are in luck you are in absolute luck, because if you live on the coast and you're near the water, you're going to find seaweed coming in. And seaweed is one of the best composted materials I can think of. It is perfect for hugelkultures. It can be laid fresh even into your beds, and it may not smell the best, but it gives so many nutrients into your ground. So I am jealous of anyone that lives near body of water that they can access seaweed, because it's amazing. Now, again, you want to make sure that you've gotten the pests removed from it and things like that. But an amazing composted material that is free to you. And here are some of the books for Hugelkultur. Again, these books are helpful. They're very helpful. But honestly, you can go online and find a lot of tutorials. You can see people starting their Hugelkultur bunkers from start to finish. And then you can you can just play around with it. But these books are great, and they will help you figure out how to get started, and possibly give you more ideas than I've given you. And the last slide here is a thank you for listening to my presentation. And come find us at People's Market. It's peoplesmarketbtown.org, and learn about what we're doing. And if you have some money to spare, it would be great, because we are a volunteer-run collective, and we support food insecurity in Bloomington, Indiana, where there is a lot of hunger, and we do live in a food desert. And I believe that's it. And I think my good friend Emma is going to show you a link to get to my gardening book. And I'll talk about that a little bit. So I'm going to stop sharing.
Hi. I was gonna do the Q&A first, and then I'll put up that last slide. Does that work for you, Jada?
Okay, yeah, that's totally fine.
All right. So I do have a handful of questions here for us.
Okay, yeah.
The first is, what if someone does not have logs available? What can they fill in those mounds with?
Yeah, the twigs and things like that. But if you personally don't have logs available, this is what I'm saying, is that you need to look into the community around you. Your neighbors may have logs. People down the street may have logs. Again, your farmers co-op may have logs, or the farmers in your community may have logs. This is a resource that people are willing to give you for free because they're saying, you come haul it, take it away. Great. I don't have to deal with it. So it is possible to find them. If you don't have them, you can just put in twigs or garden waste to be the starting part. Again, you can also use layers of cardboard and newspaper that will act similarly. Sawdust is also good, similarly to the logs. But really, the logs are going to be the long-term feeding for your Hugelkultur bunkers.
Great, thank you. And you, through that answered another question in the chat, so that was perfect.
Okay.
I don't quite understand this one, but maybe you will.
Sure.
Can one cut their grass and flip it upside down? Is that
Yeah,
I didn't
yeah.
quite...
Cutting your grass and letting your clippings sit for just a little bit
Uh-huh.
is exactly what you want to do. I am not someone who wants to put fresh grass clippings. Some people do. I'm not saying no. I'm saying some people do. Yeah.
And while I ask you a few more questions here, I just want to also let you know that there's a lot of positive feedback coming in the chat.
Good.
So
That's
thank
very
you so
good.
much, Jada.
Yeah. And then also the same with like weeds when you're weeding out your beds and things like that. If you just let them sit, so that the roots are died off enough that they're not going to try to come back. Bindweed, I would say no, but because bindweed,
vicious stuff.
Bindweed and creeping Charlie is the bane of my existence, and I fight it on a daily basis. And we're in a war, and I hate it.
Uh-huh.
But it is That's not what I would use, but if you have like dandelions and things like that, just other sorts of weeds, just let them dry out a little bit so that the roots are dead, that the leaves are dead, and then that can be a part of that composted green material you're putting in.
Cool. Um, and then you addressed that question at the end of your presentation, so that's perfect. You mentioned planting pest deterrents, and I was hoping you could give us an example of one of those.
Pest deterrents, yes.
Mhm.
Well, marigolds is one of my favorite pest deterrents. And they're also pollinator attractors. So great around your tomatoes, great around other plants as well. They're really good in your garden for everything from the aphids and things like that. So, and they're just pretty. Plus, you plant marigolds once, you have seeds forever.
Forever.
So you can pick them at the end of the season or as they die off, and you will always have marigold seeds. Right now, I have millions of them that I would love to give away to people because we plant so many of them because they're pretty and they attract pollinators and they just give so much. But basil's good. Basil and dill are good for pest attractors. I live in an area where we have to be very careful about the deer and rabbits. And so I use controlled planting of certain herbs like mint and catmint, which, yes, it will spread. I know this. It will spread. So you have to be careful about how you plant it and where you plant it. But I find that that keeps them out of my fresh plants and my flowers because they don't like the smell.
Gotcha. And I just want to say I do have just a few more questions, but if anyone has to leave, don't worry, you can catch the replay for the last few questions here. Uh, what do you think of overwintering with a nitrogen fixer like fava beans in your mounds?
Yeah.
Sound like a good idea?
Yeah, I mean, anytime you want to put a cover crop and overwinter with something, that's great. I think I think it's good. We're just sort of experimenting with some cover cropping this year. We're going to use some kalmut, which is an ancient
Yes.
grain. And so we're going to cover crop with kalmut this year, so that we get a kalmut harvest as well. And it's CUMUT, I believe. Um, and
Um,
yeah, it's
I
lovely.
know.
It works great as a puffed grain as well. So
Puffed grain, I like it in place of oatmeal in the morning. It's
yes,
really hearty in the wintertime.
yes,
Big
yeah.
fan.
I see some folks talking about coconuts and the coconut products coming from far away.
Mm.
Um, yes, no. It is also a waste product that people are desperately trying to get rid of. So in other countries where they're growing a lot of coconut for us or for other places, they have all this waste. So it's a way for countries, especially poorer countries, to make some money. And it's a way for them to get rid of all this waste that would just go in their own version of landfills. The same with banana leaves and banana trees. Um, Only one tree produces a certain amount of bananas and then it's done for the year and you cut and chop it. A lot of commercial banana companies just they throw it away. They don't use it as compost. So, but it's great compost. And so, looking at organizations that are trying really, really hard to reuse that waste material is good. Yes, we're talking about transporting it from this place to this place, but you're also transporting the coconut as it is. So thinking about that and how to make use of everything that is available. Yeah.
Right.
Someone's saying something about biochar too.
Which is often is coconut, isn't it?
Yeah.
Mm.
People use
Um,
coconut to do biochar as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm into biochar, I'm into oh, my brain is gonna stop working on. There are a lot of ways to make really, really good compost. Um, and on your own. And that's a whole other lecture.
And
It's like,
we plug for us, we have several videos on our YouTube channel
good,
about this that go
good.
into all sorts of different composting methods. If
Go
Jada, if
ahead.
someone is lucky enough to have access to seaweed, do they have to rinse the salt off first?
100%. Yeah, you need to clean them and get the pests out of them. Um, Clean them as best as possible. You soak them and get the pests out. Um, and then and the salt off as well. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. I'm going to put up our last slide here and close us out. Okay. Moving everything around. There we go.
There we go.
I have a link to register for our next webinar with Jada, and then also a QR code for Jada's book. It's a wonderful resource. It has all sorts of different tools in it, checklists, journaling, about different journaling topics. So it's really useful, and it's just beautiful. So I encourage you to check it out.
Thank you very much. Yeah, the book is a comprehensive guide, can really help you. It has a plant tracker, it has a garden planner in it, it has a weather tracker, and then a weekly planner in it. And then my favorite part of it is the seed inventory and the plant inventory. And so the plant inventory is great because like you know, people plant your perennials and then you forget when you planted them and how old they are and what sort of maintenance they are, or where they're at in your garden and things like that. And I or with trees, like how when you planted a tree and you know you need to keep track of that stuff so you can think about the maintenance for them. So I tried really hard to put everything I wanted in a journal. I think the only thing I'm sad about is that it's bound as opposed to a ringed binder, but that was how Amazon chose to do it. And I'm sorry that it's available on Amazon. I really hate that it's available on Amazon. But if you get in touch with me through People's Market, you can buy it from me directly instead of from Amazon. And it's just who is making things available right now.
And
And
I did put a link in the chat earlier for the People's Market, and you can
oh,
find
great.
contact info there. I'll put
Yes.
it in again toward the end. Um, all right, folks. Thank you for joining us today and being a part of Green America's Climate Victory Gardens community. Together, we can make a real difference in creating positive change for our planet and its people. You can keep the momentum going and stay connected by subscribing to our newsletter to remain informed about our latest campaigns, events, and sustainability tips. Your support fuels our work toward a greener, fairer future. Consider donating today to help us continue our vital programs and initiatives, including these free gardening webinars. Every contribution counts. Remember, your actions matter, and together we can build a more sustainable and just world. Thank you for your commitment to creating positive change, and we look forward to seeing you at our future events. Thank you so much for joining, everyone, and be on the lookout for that recording. And thank you, Nicole, for joining us today. Really
Thanks
appreciate
so much, Nicole.
it. All right.
Yeah. I hope I didn't go too fast or blur my words for you.
You're fine. Not fast.
I'm gonna close here.
Okay, Emma, thank you so much.
Yep. Thank you.
I'll
Bye.
talk to you
Take
later,
care,
babe.
everyone.